So, I mean, these lateral flow tests aren't new. They've been out for 20 years, and sort of what we brought to the table was instead of these 40 nanometer diameter gold particles, we can also make much more complicated and interesting structures, typically out of these golds and silvers, which have just these unusual properties at that scale, just the way that the materials interact with light. They perform as these little antennas. And by changing the size of the shape, you can shift what wavelength they absorb at. You can change their color, and you can really change the amount of light that can be funneled in. So for these tests, when you've got this one particle and this pregnancy test, they're good, but they're only so good. You can only detect so much because they're only so sensitive. And there's a whole bunch of diseases and conditions that would work in this cheap and inexpensive format, but you can't quite get that sensitivity in cells. But what we did was we went back and kind of re-engineered the particle. So instead of these gold particles that are solid, we made a nanoshell. So it's almost like an eggshell. So you've got a glass core and then a very thin shell of gold around the outside. And by controlling the dimensions of that radius of that inner core and that thickness of the shell, we can create different colors, and we can find a particular variant that is much more sensitive than these 40 nanometer gold particles. And so what that means is that all of these tests that you wanted to do but you weren't quite sensitive enough, now you can do them. And so all of a sudden it opens up this whole other range of different tests. And then the other thing that's come along is really the advancement of cell phones and mobile technology and sort of inexpensive diagnostic hardware. And so instead of it being a $1,000 benchtop thing that sits on in some clinical lab, all of a sudden we've got a $10 attachment that will communicate with your smartphone and send the quantitative results from these tests to your phone, and then that changes everything again. So increasing the sensitivity, having more of these inexpensive diagnostics that are mobile and internet connected is going to allow this whole other wave of applications associated with testing.